Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to add a timer control to our game. A timer basically is used to specify a period of time, usually in milliseconds, before a code or an event is fired. And it does that using the tick event because a clock obviously ticks. So, but for our game, what we're going to do, we are going to use a timer so that it will specify a certain period of time that will enable the player to choose two icons. And if the icons don't match, it will hide both icons again after a short period of time. So we'll set an interval where you select two icons. If they don't match, it then disappears from the screen. So let's add a timer control. So click on the toolbox and just click on the general toolbox. Let's expand that. Let's click on it again. So let's click on the toolbox icon. If you find that the toolbox is not populated, you can either go to view and select the toolbox from here. If you find that it's not populated, or you can right click and there should be an option to show all. So what we're going to do, we are going to add a timer control, and usually a timer control is usually between the component. There is a toolbar component. So we select the component section of the toolbox and we'll look for the timer. That's the timer. You could either drag it onto your form or you double click on it. So I'm just going to double click, and if I look on the form, that's the timer. So it's added it, and you can see the properties here. So when you're changing properties, make sure that the name that displays on the property window reflects the object you're trying to change the property for. Okay, while you've got the timer property selected, let's change the interval. So the interval basically is the time it has to wait before an action takes place. So the default is set to 100. I'm going to change that to 750. So what this interval does, this interval property tells the timer how long to wait between the ticks of the clock, or when to trigger the tick event. All right. So the value of 750 tells the timer to wait 3/4 of a second, which is 750 milliseconds before it fires off the tick event. We are going to leave the enabled property for the timer to false because we don't want it to automatically start. What we're going to do, we are going to call fire off the clock by using a start method that will start the timer only after the player chooses the second label, because that's why we've got to have this property, enabled property, set to false, because we don't want the timer to start too early. So let's generate a tick event handler. So to do that, we just the two things we could do, we could either go into the event part here and double click that, or we can double click on the timer here. So I just double click here, and that will add a click event, a tick event to our code. I'm just going to write the code for the event, the tick event, and then I'll explain the code to you. So here I've written some code here for the tick event. I'll just run through the code with you. I'll start with the line 74 of the code, which is the timer one.stop method. Okay, so what happens here, we're making sure that the timer isn't running by calling this method here. This stops the clock, so we don't want the clock to be running before the player clicks one of the labels. So that's why this method here stops the clock before any click starts. And we've used the two reference variables here, the first click variable and the second click variable, and I've set the fore color to equals to the back color of both variables. So what this does, it will make them invisible. And then these two lines here, lines 77 and 78, this first click equals null, second click equals null. What this does, it resets the variables, so the next time the label is clicked, the program knows it's the first click. All right, so this two, first click equals null, second click equals null, resets the variable again to make them available to be clicked on. As well as a stop method, a timer also has a start method. So we are going to implement the start the clock method or start the timer method, and we're going to do that inside the label click event handler method. And what we're going to do, we're going to be adding an if statement, okay, at the top of that method. And also we're going to include the start method at the bottom of it. So let's go down to where our click label is. So this is where we want to add the method. The first thing we want to do is put an if statement. So we're going to add an if statement here, right at the top here. So what we're going to say is if, we're going to check if so we want the timer to only start running only after two non-matching icons have been shown to the player. So here I've implemented an if statement here, which says if this timer is enabled, it will check. So what this if statement does, it checks if the timer is running. Okay, if that is true, it will check that and return a value. The timer will only run, the timer is only going to run after two non-matching icons have been shown to the player. Okay, so what will happen there, it will ignore any clicks if the timer is running. That's what this code means. So now we need to add this where the clock will start. So we scroll down to the bottom of this method. Because we want the timer to start after the second label has been clicked, I have added the second label reference variables here. So once the first label has been clicked, it will return the label, the icon, and then the second label has been clicked. After the second label has been clicked, the timer will start. It will call the start timer method to activate, and the timer, the tick event, which is the tick event will kick in, which is this event here, will be called from here. The timer will start running or ticking. Note that this will only be called, the timer will only start after the second label has been clicked. So the if statement here, this if statement at the top here, what that will do, it will check whether the timer was started by checking the value of the enabled property. That way, if the player chooses the first and second label controls and the timer starts, choosing a third label won't do anything. So the code at the bottom here, this second click label here, what that does, it will set the code at the bottom will of that, this code here, it sets the second click reference variable, which is this variable. It sets that variable to track the second label control that the player chooses, and then it will set that label's icon color to black to make it visible. Then the timer starts. The timer's tick event handler will then kick in and hide the two icons and reset the first clicked and the second click reference variable, so the form is ready for the player to choose another pair of icons. So let's save this and test the code. So we'll click on save. So if I select a pair of icons, they will remain visible for a few intervals and then disappear. So that's the first one. Select the second one. You see, they've disappeared after 750 milliseconds. You see? So the code is working as designed. In this lecture, we added a timer control and also implemented the code for the timer tick event. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.